I'm Talia Ricci. Tonight, Mayor John Tory announces a nearly $50 million increase to Toronto's police budget.
I will strongly resist the continuing efforts of those who would reduce the police budget.
Tory says the money will be used to hire new officers, but some advocates say the move won't make for a safer city. Plus,
all that mattered was, the health of Damar Hamlin.
A shocking moment from yesterday's Buffalo Bills game. As Damar Hamlin remains in critical condition, the community comes together to show their support. And
people are being sent back home without their luggage.
Stranded Sunwing passengers are making their way home, but many travelers are still waiting to be reunited with their lost luggage. John Tory says Toronto police need a $48 million budget increase to address rising public safety concerns. If approved, the investment would be used to hire 200 more frontline officers. But as Sean Jeffords tells us, that plan is receiving pushback.
John Tory has kicked off the city's budget season with a push for a beefed-up police budget. The mayor says hundreds more officers are needed to address violence in the city.
A good number of crimes we've seen in the city generally are serious, and they cause significant anxiety for the people who live in the city. So we must do everything we can to address crime and to keep people safe and have them feel safe in our city.
The mayor unveiled the budget request today, asking City Council to approve a 4.3% increase. The budget will go to the police board first for sign-off and then to council next month for full approval. If endorsed, the spending package will see more staff hired, including 200 police officers, 90 special constables, and 20 911 operators.
These are investments which, in my best judgment, we must make now. I will strongly resist the continuing efforts of those who would reduce the police budget.
The city spent over $1.1 billion on the police service last year, and calls against this year's budget increase came swiftly. Activist Desmond Cole says the money won't help community safety.
An increase in policing on the streets of Toronto automatically means more peril for homeless people, for Black and Indigenous people, for queer and trans people, for sex workers. It automatically means more peril.
City Councillor Gord Perks says evidence from around the world suggests simply pouring money into hiring more officers doesn't increase community safety. He says pulling some duties away from police officers and hiring community workers in their place would be smarter.
Why are we sending police to overdose calls? Why are we sending them to mental health calls? You can get better outcomes for less money if you invest in professionals who can deal with those problems.
Former Mayor John Sewell agrees and says increasing the police budget will only crowd out other needed services.
My feeling is that the real issues about community safety involve the homeless and mentally ill people who are on the transit or anywhere else. And if we want to deal with those, we got to start spending money actually dealing with those things, and having more police officers won't deal with them.
The city's budget process will look a little different this year under John Tory's new strong mayor powers. Tory has more control over assembling the budget, and those duties used to reside with city staff. City Council will also now need a 2/3 majority vote to change or amend the budget. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
We're learning new details about a tragic house fire in Hamilton last Thursday. It took the lives of 4 people, including 2 children. Greg Ross has the latest on the investigation.
The Ontario Fire Marshal is still trying to determine what caused the fire here at 14 Derby Street in Hamilton last week. They have been able to confirm that the fire started on a couch in the living room on the main level of this townhouse here behind me. They also say that their original suspicions were correct and that there were no working smoke detectors in the home at the time of the fire. There were 6 people in the house when the fire started. The fire marshal says all of them were on the upper level. 2 children and 2 adults died in this fire. Fire Marshal John Pegg says their deaths were preventable.
The most common trend that we're seeing is in fatal fires, the most common trend is no working smoke alarms. That's what we're trying to drive home, that little device. And smoke alarms, they've really increased over the years. The technology in them has increased. You can get a 10-year sealed smoke alarm now that you don't have to change the batteries on. But a very basic, like the one I showed right here, battery-operated smoke alarm will and can protect your family.
The identities of the victims of this fire have still not been released, but other residents here in this neighborhood tell us that there was a mother and father living in the home with their 2 young children, as well as another man who rented a room from them, and we're told that there was a friend over at the time of the fire as well. Now, this is a rental property, and the Hamilton Fire Chief telling us today that they are considering charges against the owner of this home for not having fully functional smoke detectors in the house.
Our fire prevention division is now in the process of working with the investigative team, taking a look at the evidence as well as the city's legal team, and we're looking to pursue charges against the owner relative to failure to have a working smoke alarm.
The Ontario Fire Marshal telling us today that this fire capped off one of the worst years for fire-related fatalities in decades. The 4 people who died in this home last week bring the total number of fire-related fatalities up to 133 in Ontario last year. And they say in many of those deaths, not having working smoke detectors was a factor. And I can tell you that last week, Hamilton firefighters were actually in this neighborhood, going door to door and handing out smoke detectors to residents here. And the Hamilton fire chief telling us that they were able to determine that there were other homes here that did not have working smoke detectors or had smoke detectors that needed to have the batteries replaced. Greg Ross, CBC News, Hamilton.
Police say they've charged a man for allegedly pushing another man onto the tracks of a Toronto subway this evening. It happened around 6:15 at Bloor-Yonge Station. Police say the pair got into a physical altercation and one man pushed the other off the platform. TTC special constables arrested the suspect on scene. He has been charged with assault. Anyone with information is asked to contact investigators. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin remains in hospital tonight. He suffered a cardiac arrest and collapsed on the field in a game against Cincinnati last night. Ali Chiasson has the latest, including reaction from fans.
Wide open. A blow to the chest, a blow to the sport.
I'd never seen it in football. I've never seen that.
Devoted Bills fan from London, Ontario, Jason Kerr, watched as so many did in horror on their television screens.
Football didn't matter. The game didn't matter. What the Buffalo Bills are doing right now, as a season didn't matter. All that mattered was, the health of Damar Hamlin.
The NFL has been under recent scrutiny about their concussion and return to play protocol after players have collapsed before. But this wasn't a concussion. It was likely something much more rare.
When you have a young, otherwise healthy player who collapses with no heartbeat because of a blow to the chest, there's really one diagnosis that comes to mind, and this is the presumption, is that he suffered what's called commotio cordis.
Cardiologist Dr. Christopher Labos says it's extremely rare because a blow to the chest, in Hamlin's case, a tackle, has to happen in a certain spot at a certain time to be potentially fatal.
If you get a blow to the center of your chest, right over the breastbone, right over where the heart is, you're basically thumping the heart. And if you thump the heart at exactly the right moment when it starts repolarizing in the cardiac cycle, that can trigger some of the channels, the electrical channels in the heart to open, and that predisposes you to arrhythmia. And so when that starts happening and your heart stops beating, you're not pumping blood. And when your heart is not pumping blood, you're not delivering oxygen to your vital organs, most especially the brain.
Even though medics restored Hamlin's heartbeat on the field, his recovery really comes down to how long his brain went without oxygen, what kind of neurological damage he may have suffered, and whether he can recover at all.
Hamlin's family released a statement today saying, quote, "We are deeply moved by the prayers, kind words, and donations from fans around the country. Please keep Damar in your prayers." Hamlin remains in critical condition at a Cincinnati hospital this evening. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Sunwing Airlines says stranded travelers have been brought home, but the complaints haven't ended. Some customers who were forced to travel without their luggage still don't have it, while others have had their vacations canceled. Dale Manukduk has more.
So people are being sent back home without their luggage?
They're saying they gotta look for it if you want to stick around. They might find it now or they might find it tomorrow.
Helena Samoz was able to get her lost luggage tonight after spending an entire week-long Sunwing Destinations vacation without it.
My husband's medication, that was a really big thing. I had no formula, no diapers.
According to Pearson Airport, extreme weather caused mechanical issues to the baggage belt system in Terminal 3, where Sunwing services its customers, leaving many without their personal belongings. Upon return, travelers were instructed to pick up their luggage from this Mississauga warehouse. Samoz says she was one of the lucky ones.
There was people in the lineup who were saying that their friend came from Ottawa, drove 9 hours, only to be told that Their luggage couldn't be found.
I will never go with Sunwing ever again, just based on the pure lack of communication.
Samo says while in Cuba, she could rarely find the Sunwing rep.
Like Pokeroo, we had just missed him.
The baggage issue was just one of many weather-related problems that resulted in delays and cancellations, leaving many Canadians stranded. Sunwing says impacted passengers may submit a claim for compensation or a refund. Travelers are eligible for up to $1,000.
Airline can resort to insurance claims on their own, but this is really a cost of doing business.
But not everyone qualifies for Sunwing's terms for compensation.
How are you going to compensate me for a vacation that was, less than ideal because of us not having anything, like nothing? And I know that sounds awful compared to the people who are sleeping on the floors of airports in Cancun and stuff.
Meanwhile, Sunwing says it's canceling travel operations at both the Saskatoon and Regina airports up to and including February 3rd. MP Peter Schiefke tweeted he will be convening a meeting of the Transport Committee and will be calling on Via Rail and Sunwing to appear, calling the delays and cancellations unacceptable, writing Canadians deserve answers. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Meteorologist Colette Kennedy joins us now with a first look at the forecast. And Colette, it was pretty gloomy out there today.
Yeah, I tell you, this is a really persistent system because it kind of the warm front just sort of stalled out. It doesn't want to move on, so it keeps the conditions similar, although there are subtle changes. So it gets a little lighter through the overnight tonight, more the fog and the drizzle. Still some areas included in the rainfall warning with additional amounts where it does actually get a bit more intense, 15 to 25 millimeters. But it's going to be a bit of a back and forth with this until we really get through Thursday. So the rainfall through tonight and Wednesday, and even getting heavier for the GTA tomorrow night. So just having a look at how this passes through, there's a bit of that lull. Then here we are tomorrow morning's commute. Looks like it is going to be a wet one, especially for the early commuters. If you're a little later on the tail end, you might do okay with a bit more of a break. And then we go into the evening hours and heavy rain pushes in once again. Also, just a note to travelers, quite an extensive area of freezing rain, the ice pellets, really from northeastern Ontario stretching to Kingston and on towards the nation's capital tonight through tomorrow, so something to watch for there. 2, your overnight low, the high tomorrow 3, very little change in our temperature that we're seeing.
Thanks, Colette. The wage gap between the average worker and Canada's top executives only continues to grow. A report released today shows the 100 best paid CEOs in Canada now receive well over 200 times more than the typical worker. Nisha Patel has more.
Many Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, but it's a different reality for some of the country's highest paid CEOs.
Obviously, there's some disparity.
It's a really huge gap.
New numbers show CEOs received record high compensation in 2021. The top 100 executives raked in an average $14.3 million. That's 243 times what the average worker earned. The gap has ballooned since 2009, when it was about 155 times more.
When you hit all-time high corporate profits due to inflation, you're also going to hit all-time high executive compensation and CEO pay.
This economist says while CEO pay has soared, many average workers haven't seen their wages rise. It's the growing gap that concerns him.
It really raises the fundamental question of who benefits from economic growth. Is it all Canadians? Or is it really just the folks at the very top?
So who are some of the best paid CEOs in Canada? The head of CP Rail earned nearly $27 million. Shopify's chief made more than $25 million. And the top boss at TELUS brought home a paycheck of nearly $20 million. While TELUS workers have been trying to negotiate a new contract for months.
When somebody out there, anybody out there, is making money hand over fist, and those that make them their wealth are left out of the picture completely. That's the problem.
Some experts argue top compensation is necessary to attract top talent. And while CEOs get big rewards, they also take on big risks.
The salaries are very high, and the expectations are very high, and the moment they don't meet those expectations, they're cut.
The report suggests Canada should look at policy proposals like a wealth tax to tackle the income inequality that is growing by the year. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Well, there's always some uncertainty about what the new year will bring, but Torontonians can at least expect one thing in 2023: construction, and lots of it. There are hundreds of projects planned. Meg Roberts tells us about 3 that will bring some big changes to the city.
So that's going to be much needed housing for the City of Toronto.
After years of anticipation, The Well, located on Front Street and Spadina, will open its doors to the general public this year. And we're getting a sneak peek.
Above us, we have a 30,000 square foot canopy, and it's as you can see, it's glass, and it's meant not to create an enclosure. It's meant to really just protect you from the more extreme elements.
The development occupies 8 acres with 6 residential buildings, more than 1 million square feet of office space, and a 4-tiered open-air market inspired by European architecture.
It feels intimate, and that it feels like it fits in to the surroundings around it.
The development sits on a 7.5 million litre tank. Water from Lake Ontario will be stored in it and used to heat and cool the entire downtown West District. This will also be a crucial year in the planning of a massive residential development project in Scarborough. The Greater Golden Mile is being hailed as the largest build over the next decade, with 77 residential towers, housing more than 50,000 people. The project, co-led by the United Way, is focusing on 3 priorities the community has identified.
How do we build inclusive communities where there is deeply affordable housing, good jobs for people that come in and out of the Greater Golden Mile in Scarborough, and strong services close by?
Before shovels hit the ground in 2024, there will be a major hiring campaign. The project is expected to create close to 20,000 jobs targeted at local residents.
This is a blueprint for how we should be building neighborhoods, not only in the GTA, but across Canada.
Of course, Torontonians can expect major infrastructure construction. The Ontario Line, a subway line that will run from Exhibition Place to the Ontario Science Centre, will continue in 2023 on a very busy stretch.
Queen Street is my favorite place in the whole world.
This business owner is concerned for what construction will mean for the area.
What kind of comfort is it when you have no understanding of what the future is going to be like?
He's watching what's happening to the businesses around the Eglinton Crosstown LRT project. It's been delayed and over budget. More than 100 businesses have had to close their doors as a result of construction.
Look what you've done to the people that were there, and did you take care of them? No.
Doing such a massive new subway is a great investment for the city. And yes, it is a very painful project for businesses, local residents, commuters using that thoroughfare along Queen Street, and will be for a decade.
The former councillor for the ward is hoping the city, Metrolinx, and businesses can come up with a plan to lessen the disruption.
It could be a moment of creativity and a different kind of entrepreneurship that could save a lot of businesses and make the pain be as minimal as possible.
At the end of last year, the City of Toronto had 147 major road restrictions in place. The city says some of 2023's construction projects are here for years to come. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
And there's a live look at the city skyline. More showers tonight after a rainy day, currently sitting at around 3 degrees. And Colette's back now with our extended forecast, and it sounds like we should be ready for more rain before it clears up.
Yeah, that's what we're going to see, Talia. There are going to be these patches or periods of time where the rain's a little more organized. So through the overnight hours, not so significant in the GTA, but early tomorrow morning we get into one of those, then a bit of a lull where it's more like showery, drizzly activity. And then tomorrow evening, some of that heavier rain is going to come back. So yes, some areas still persisting with the rainfall warning too, as I was showing you earlier in the show, especially there towards the Niagara region. Very little flux, very little change in the temperature between tonight and tomorrow, and then we just start to cool down a little further towards the end of the week, but still we're generally running above seasonal. It will be enough to change the form of precipitation over to some wet flurries away from the rainfall, and so that's really what I mean by the change here. The temperature, it's not that drastic a change, but it's enough to get us closer to the freezing mark there. So just kind of looking ahead, I also mentioned this earlier in the show, and I do just want to point out that there is that risk for some freezing rain and ice pelts that will develop through northeastern Ontario and extending all the way towards Kingston and the nation's capital as we get into Thursday. So later tomorrow on Wednesday into Thursday, but just looking, this is some of the heavier rain for the morning commute. It's a small patch, but still that slows things down. It doesn't take much, right? And then along that frontal boundary, now you're seeing this developing where we have the areas in pink. So some slick roadways here. If you do need to or plan to do any traveling, you may want to postpone or kind of change your route here if at all possible, because that's starting Wednesday afternoon. But what we're going to see is that area is going to actually expand. So that's the issue there. And then the issue for the GTA, in fact, all the way around the Golden Horseshoe, is that when we get into Wednesday night, becomes more organized. Even some pockets embedded thunderstorms possible. So locally, some heavier downpours there. That slightly cooler air filters in behind, and that changes all that activity over to some flurry activity. And nowhere really in there did you see much in the way of clearing. So we are going to have to deal with the gray skies for the next little while. Wet conditions and gray skies. Some of the additional amounts towards Port Hope in those regions where you could be picking up 30 to 40 millimeters there as well, although at this time outside of a rainfall warning. Overnight temperatures, there's that kind of change, 2-3 degrees. Big differences into southwestern Ontario where you get into the warm sector and see that temperature rising to double digits by morning. But for us, Toronto, 3 degrees, slightly cooler Thursday, just enough to make that switch over.
Well, if you're not sure of the best way to unwind after a hard day at work, you may want to take your lead from some camels. Owners in Saudi Arabia can now leave their hardworking camels at a special desert hotel. Services range from doctor examinations to security and comfort that is second to none. Guests indulge in gourmet food and drink, and by that we mean barley and milk. And before we go, we have some photos to show you of a remarkable rescue near Sudbury. A moose got stuck after falling through some ice on a lake. As you can see, the animal was clearly in trouble, and a quick-thinking group who spotted the moose found a way to help. Together, they used a rope to pull her out of the water. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Kelda Yoon will have your next newscast tomorrow night at 11. Good night.